What's going on, guys? It's Matt from the Baller Scholar podcast, and this is a new segment I'm calling 10 Minutes with Matt. Basically, I get to speak for 10 minutes, uninterrupted, none of those other guys disagreeing with me or my hot takes or rolling their eyes when I say the Raptors are going to be the 2 seed, even though now they're 3-8. None of that. Today, I'm going to present an argument, and you're going to have to decide whether I'm crazy or maybe I'm onto something. We all get to do it in portrait mode because I want to be artsy and I'm sick of, correct ratios on things. So today, we're going to talk about what everyone's been talking about this week in the NBA, and that is the James Harden trade. You thought I might do some kind of redirection, talk about Mitchell Robinson or someone random like that. No, we're going to talk about the James Harden trade, but on a little bit more of kind of a broader scope here, looking at, he's the latest in a long string of superstars demanding trades. And we now have kind of a large sample size of what teams are willing to give up and what teams are willing to accept in terms of a deal involving someone that is, of James Harden's caliber. And, we've seen AD, we've seen Paul George, and it looks like, 3 to 4 first-round picks. You throw in, an Oladipo, a Karis LeVert, Brandon Ingram, Lonzo Ball. You have to throw in a guy that kind of can be a plug-and-play, that can be a perennial starter in the NBA. And today, really my argument's going to be not looking at those players, but actually looking at how valuable are these 3 to 4 first-round picks. And, inevitably when you trade a superstar to another team, that team generally gets better, and therefore those picks get worse and become, later in the draft. Now, there are exceptions. The first one that comes to mind, obviously, is the Celtics-Nets trade involving Pierce and Garnett for a boatload of picks. That didn't pan out well for the Nets. And, Celtics turn into Tatum Brown, and the rest is history. But in most cases, and probably what will happen in the George, in the AD, in the James Harden trades, is that those picks will be later in the draft. So I did some digging. I looked at the last 10 NBA drafts, and I divided that pool of players into 2 different sections. The players that were drafted 1 through 14, the lottery picks, and the non-lottery picks 15 through 30. And I basically went through each player and took a look at kind of what role they're playing on their current team, whether they're a superstar, whether they made an all-star team, if they're just a starter, role player, bench warmer, or if they're not in the NBA. And then I compared the 2 pools of players. Now, one of the most kind of eye-catching stats that come from this is that of the players drafted 15 through 30 in the last 10 years, 45% of them are no longer in the NBA. Now, obviously that number increases the farther back you go. Guys will have 5 to 7 year careers and then call it quits, or, can't make a team and whatnot. But that's compared to about 15% of players 1 through 14. Now, of course, there are exceptions. You look at Dragon Bender, was a 4th overall pick, was in the NBA for about a heartbeat, never really stuck, and he's gone. It happens. The draft is a gamble. No matter where you're picking, there's very rarely any surefire, selections ever. But that's the first thing that, if you're thinking, we got James Harden, we got rid of him for 4 first rounders, we're, might turn those into good guys. Chances are at least 2 of those 4 guys will not be in the league in a decade. So there's that. The next thing is your chances of getting a superstar or an all-star late in the first round. It doesn't happen very often. When you look at the past 10 years, Kawhi and Giannis were both drafted at 15, which obviously is kind of on the fringe there. You take them out of it, it's pretty scarce. There's Rudy Gobert, Nikola Vucevic, Pascal, and Jimmy Butler. And those are the only guys that have made an all-star team in the past 10 years that were drafted between 15 and 30. Now, when you look at, obviously, I mean, it's kind of obvious to some degree that, players drafted higher up would make more all-star teams, but the numbers themselves, really put into perspective when you look at the difference in that, 24, there have been 24 all-stars. That's 24 individual players making an all-star game drafted 1 through 14 in that same span. So you're not really likely going to flip a superstar for, 2 all-stars that you draft in consecutive years. Because, when you look at this on a broader scope, my argument is you're not going to win a championship through the draft. The last team to do that, you'd have to go 5 years back, Golden State Warriors. They had Curry, Clay, and Draymond. But since then, they picked up KD in free agency. You look at Cleveland trading for Kevin Love. LeBron re-signs in free agency. And then Toronto with Kawhi. And then this past year with the Lakers and Anthony Davis. The reality is you probably are going to have to acquire a second, third star in free agency or in a blockbuster trade like we saw this week with James Harden. Because what you need in order to win a championship through the draft, first of all, you're going to need consecutive top 5 picks. We see it with the Celtics, with, Jason Tatum, Jaylen Brown. That worked out. Sixers, Embiid, and Simmons. Neither team has yet to win a championship. It might be a piece or two away, depending on how you look at it. But that's first, and that rarely happens. Or you just have to be extremely either lucky or, have some of the best scouts and up, front offices in the business, which with the Warriors, they hit on Curry, Clay, and Draymond all, not top 5. Obviously, Curry and Thompson were, in the lottery. So that's the next thing. And, drafts vary. You could have, even if you do have a top 5 pick, it could be a draft with, Anthony Bennett going number 1. And it's like there's just not enough talent that your top 5 pick isn't going to do anything, And then there are other drafts where you have LeBron, Bosh, Wade, and Melo all going in the top 5. There's no way to know. And with those draft picks, there is that element of uncertainty that can be really enticing, but ultimately can be really dangerous if, you're losing a guy is great, that can perform in the NBA for an unknown. And so if you're giving up 4 of those, it's not going to happen. So if I'm a contender, or if I'm, in that pool of teams that might be one piece away, like the Celtics, like the Sixers, could throw the Pacers in there, who have a really strong, starting 5 now. Even maybe the Jazz, for example, too, with Mitchell and just re-signing Gobert. He's going to be there for a while. Do you want to just be a perennial playoff team? What is the point of being, a 3 seed, winning a playoff series and then exiting? If it was me, what do I need a first round pick for? If teams like the Rockets with a superstar, are willing to deal him for a couple picks, I'm taking that every single day. Bradley Beal, if he becomes available and I'm one of those teams, take my next 4 first round picks. I'm going to have Bradley Beal. You can take my 26th overall pick next year. I don't care. I'm going to have Bradley Beal, Jaylen Brown, Jason Tatum on my team. What do I need my next 4 round picks? I'm going to be in the playoffs. I don't need to develop guys. You know what I'm saying? So I would be extremely aggressive in trying to acquire that 3rd star. And you know what? You made a championship run. You get a 5-year window with Bradley Beal. It doesn't happen, you get your picks back and you can start over again. It's not the end of the world. We saw it with the Nets. They got brutally taken advantage of by the Celtics in the Pierce Garnett trade. And those guys were older. But now the Nets, they had a couple down years. And look where they are now. They got KD, Kyrie, and James Harden, and are now one of the top teams to contend for a title this season. This has been 10 Minutes with Matt.